Welcome to Midnight Rain Tales. The world sleeps, and the rain begins to whisper. In this quiet hour, stories drift through the night air, soft, chilling, unforgettable. Here, under the midnight sky, we share the tales the rain refuses to forget. Stay close and listen. Even now, Elias, the memory clings. The flea market labyrinth, sunlight slicing through dust motes above stalls, overflowing with orphaned histories. I meandered between aisles choked with brittle novels, oxidized implements, and porcelain figures bearing the scars of time, until it arrested my gaze. There, nestled beneath a tangle of mismatched reliquaries, lay the compact mirror. Its metallic shell, dulled by neglect, possessed a loose, tentative latch. An inexplicable magnetism emanated from it, a silent command. Before conscious thought could intervene, my fingers closed around its cool weight. The proprietor, a gaunt man whose face was a roadmap of wrinkles, offered a curt nod as I presented my find. Words seemed an extravagance. He simply stated the price, a negligible sum. I paid without haggling. The mirror slid into my pocket, heavy and strangely vital. A peculiar constriction tightened in my chest. Not the flutter of acquisition, but a knot of raw tension. Fatigue, I reasoned, dismissing the sensation as I walked away. Returning that afternoon to the cramped confines of my third-floor apartment, a space accessed by a groaning, temperamental lift, I deposited the mirror onto the scarred coffee table amidst the familiar landscape of a sagging couch, a cheap television stand, and wallpaper peeling like sunburnt skin in one corner. The air hung thick with the feeling of too little space. Exhaustion claimed me, and I collapsed onto the sofa, the mirror momentarily erased from my thoughts. It wasn't until the deep quiet of night descended that the compact resurfaced in my awareness. Preparing for bed, I saw it resting on the table, catching the weak glow from the standing lamp. An unsettling quality clung to it now. Logic dictated stowing it away, yet I left it exposed. After the ritual of brushing my teeth, I found myself drawn back to the couch. I retrieved the mirror, its hinge sighing as I flipped it open. The glass presented a clouded, perhaps minutely scratched surface. My own reflection materialized, hair disheveled, eyes shadowed with weariness. Then a barely perceptible flicker danced at the periphery, somewhere behind my reflected shoulder. I spun around, heart quickening. Nothing, just the familiar cramped room. Shaking my head, I attributed the anomaly to dust or some flaw in the antique glass. I buffeted it clean with the hem of my shirt and peered again. Only my face stared back. Snapping it shut, I retreated to bed. The following day unfurled in a predictable sequence of errands and overdue work, pushing the mirror to the edges of my mind. Evening arrived, bringing a hastily consumed meal and the familiar embrace of the worn couch. Then the urge surfaced, insistent and illogical. Open the mirror, I yielded. As the latch gave way, a faint coolness traced the nape of my neck. My reflection returned my gaze, unchanged, yet the space behind me felt subtly wrong. An indistinct presence hovered there, less a defined shadow, more an umbra, a smudge against the reflected reality of my living room, conforming to no object present. A swift turn revealed only empty air. When my eyes returned to the mirror, the smear had vanished. A tremor ran through me, my pulse accelerating, not outright fear, but a profound, bodily tension, I closed the compact, setting it aside with deliberate care, and sought refuge in the television's flickering light. Yet my gaze kept straying towards it, a morbid curiosity warring with a rising tide of unease, preventing me from opening it again just then. In the subsequent days, the mirror became a focal point of morbid fascination. Each time I succumbed to the compulsion to look, the reflection offered something new. My face remained a constant, but behind it, the obscure shape solidified, a patch of darkness anchoring itself in the same location, gaining definition with every viewing. Anxiety coiled in my gut. Holding the mirror brought a slick dampness to my palms, a tightening in my chest, a shallow quickening of breath. I tried to rationalize it, an optical trick, a peculiarity of aged speculum, but the way it seemed to react defied easy dismissal. Once, tilting my head, I watched the umbra's outline shift in the glass, mimicking my movement with a disquieting fractional delay. A genuine chill snaked down my spine. I attempted to banish it, consigning the mirror to the cluttered anonymity of a bedroom drawer. But escape proved illusory. One evening, bathed in the artificial glow of interior lights against the darkening sky, my reflection stared back from the living room window pane. My face, my shoulders, and then, hovering just behind, that same nebulous stain, possessing the same approximate height, the same vaguely anthropomorphic silhouette. I whirled around, adrenaline surging, anticipating an intruder. The apartment was empty. My heart hammered against my ribs, sweat beaded on my forehead. Turning back to the window, the apparition was gone. I stood gasping, the silence amplifying the frantic rhythm of my pulse. A frantic energy propelled me to the bedroom. I wrenched open the drawer, retrieved the mirror, and forced the latch. It was there, undeniably present behind my reflected self. And this time, within the deepening shadow, resided the barest suggestion of eyes. Two concentrated points of darkness, cold and unnervingly fixed upon me. I slammed the mirror shut with convulsive force, my hands trembling uncontrollably. Seeking distraction, I phoned Leo, careful to mask the true source of my agitation, citing only work stress. He suggested drinks and escape, but I declined. The reason unclear even to myself. Embarrassment, perhaps, or a nascent fear of leaving the apartment, of leaving it unattended. The call ended, leaving me adrift in my own space. I paced the narrow confines of the living room, compulsively checking shadowed corners, peering into closets, a futile exercise against the certainty of my solitude. Sleep, when it finally came, was shallow and fraught. Morning light brought a fragile resolve. I moved through the motions, dressing, a mechanical breakfast, the descent in the rattling lift. Outside, under the indifferent sun, amidst the city's cacophony, a measure of calm returned. By the time I reached the polished lobby of my office building, the night's terrors felt almost hallucinatory. Then I passed a wall clad in gleaming metal panels. My reflection slid across their surface. For a heartbeat, it was just me. Then, trailing fractionally behind, the shape materialized. I froze mid-stride. A prickling sensation crawled over my skin. My heart launched itself against my sternum. I remained transfixed, staring until a voice behind me inquired about my well-being. Feigning composure, I mumbled an excuse and fled towards the elevators, the conviction solidifying. I was losing my grip on reality. The workday passed in a haze of hypervigilance. Every reflective surface became a potential portal, a source of dread. I avoided the polished chrome, the darkened computer screens, even the restroom mirror for as long as possible. When necessity finally drove me there, I kept my gaze averted, focusing intently on the basin as I washed my hands. Yet, from the corner of my eye, a flicker, the dark figure faint but undeniably present in the periphery of the mirror's expanse. I exited abruptly. On the commute home, a desperate plan formed. A detour to a hardware store yielded a roll of heavy-duty duct tape and a small, lockable metal box. Back in the apartment, the ritual felt grimly purposeful. I swaddled the mirror in an old towel, bound it tightly with layers of tape until it resembled a featureless brick, and secured it within the box. The click of the lock offered a sliver of hope. I shoved the container deep beneath my bed, reasoning that out of sight might truly mean out of mind. For a brief interlude, peace seemed restored. That night, windows and polished surfaces remained benign. Relief washed over me. I ate, watched television, and slept with a depth I hadn't known for days. But the reprieve was short-lived. The following afternoon, navigating the damp pavement after a rain shower, I skirted a large puddle near the curb. A downward glance, involuntary, caught my reflection in the murky water, and behind it, the shape reappeared, sharper now, more defined than ever. A distinct silhouette suggesting shoulders, a vague cranial outline. My entire body seized. My heart stuttered, breath hitched in my throat. I stumbled backward, nearly losing my balance. Concerned murmurs from passers-by went unanswered as I mumbled incoherently and hurried away, the crushing realization dawning. Containment was impossible. This presence wasn't confined to the mirror. That evening, the whispers began. Sitting amidst the mundane drone of the television, a soft susurration would brush against my hearing, impossibly close, seeming to originate just behind my head. Not the neighbors through thin walls. This felt intimate, invasive. Each time I spun around, the room remained empty. The sound itself was low, less a voice than a dry, rasping exhalation, forming strange, unintelligible syllables. Gooseflesh prickled my arms with every recurrence. The thought of discarding the mirror entirely warred with that persistent, irrational pull. An urge, potent and undeniable, clamored for me to open it again. I resisted, but the internal pressure mounted, my thoughts circling back obsessively. Finally, late one night, surrender felt inevitable. I retrieved the box from its hiding place, the lock yielding with a soft click. Unwrapping the taped bundle felt like dissecting something volatile. My hands shook as I forced myself to pry open the compact. My reflection stared back, pallid and slick with sweat. Behind it, the shadow figure loomed, consuming nearly half the mirrored space. It was a stark human outline rendered in absolute black, save for those two abyssal spots where eyes should be. A profound shiver coursed through me. My gaze locked onto it, held captive in a paralyzing trance. My mouth turned to dust. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. Looking away felt impossible. Then a horrifying shift. The figure in the mirror moved. A shape resembling a hand lifted, reaching forward, seeming to press against the inner surface of the glass. A visceral revulsion twisted in my gut. I slammed the mirror shut with such violence that the small latch cracked audibly. With a strangled cry, I hurled it across the room. It skittered and clattered against the floorboards. Clutching my head, I gasped for air, my mind reeling, a wave of dizziness washing over me. I left it lying there, a fallen artifact on the worn floor. Pacing relentlessly, I sought to quell the rising panic, but its presence saturated the air, clinging to the shadows. Every dark corner seemed to harbor that shape. My own senses betrayed me, conjuring faint footfalls just behind me, the phantom rustle of unseen fabric. Each check revealed nothing but amplified my fear. Sleep that night was a fragmented, haunted affair. The next day was an exercise in strained normality. I cleaned, did laundry, studiously ignoring the mirror lying near the wall. Yet every chance reflection, the curve of a metal door handle, the blank obsidian of the television screen, offered fleeting glimpses, flickers of that persistent shape like a permanent stain on my vision. By late afternoon, the strain became unbearable. A drastic measure seemed the only recourse. Carrying the compact, I descended to the building's basement, seeking out the small, disused utility room near the storage lockers, a place of damp concrete, stale air, and perpetual gloom. I placed the mirror on a dust-laden table. The plan, obliteration. I hefted a discarded hammer, the weight feeling purposeful in my hand, but as I raised it, poised to strike, that familiar, insidious pull arrested my arm. My breath hitched, hesitation bloomed. What unforeseen consequence might shattering unleash? Would destruction free this entity or merely escalate the horror? I stood frozen, the hammer heavy, my breathing ragged in the oppressive silence. The single overhead bulb flickered erratically. A wave of distinct coldness brushed past my cheek, tangible enough to make my grip tighten. My gaze fell upon the mirror, lying open, reflecting my tense face. In the dim, unreliable light, the figure was less distinct, yet the outline remained undeniable. As I watched, transfixed, the shape within the glass seemed to subtly shift, as if anticipating the blow. And then the whispers returned, amplified in the enclosed space coiling around me. My heart hammered violently, sweat trickled into my eyes. Slowly, deliberately, I lowered the hammer. The act of destruction felt impossible, forbidden. Instead, I snapped the mirror shut, the sound sharp in the stillness, and slammed it back onto the table. Once more, I wrapped it in the towel, bound it with tape, and secured it in the locked box. This time, I concealed the box deep within the utility room, hidden behind a heap of broken furniture and discarded junk. Perhaps distance, perhaps the basement's neglected depths would finally contain it, keep the shape tethered to its prison. I returned to my apartment trembling, the encounter leaving me raw and exposed. Cleaning, showering, seeking refuge in the mindless chatter of television. None of it truly calmed the internal storm. That night, as I climbed into bed, a dense shape flickered into existence in the far corner of my bedroom. It was momentary, like a shadow thrown by something unseen outside, and then it dissolved. My heart leaped. I lay rigid, staring into the darkness of that corner until my eyes burned, eventually succumbing to an exhausted, fitful sleep. The days that followed were a descent into relentless anxiety. Footsteps seemed to echo mine in the empty hallway leading to the lift. Every reflective surface became a source of potential terror, yet avoiding them entirely proved impossible. Windows, chrome fixtures, rain puddles, the dormant screen of my phone. Flashes of the shape persisted, sometimes ephemeral, sometimes disturbingly solid. The sensation of being watched became constant. My chest remained perpetually tight, my mouth dry, a leaden weakness settling in my limbs. Sudden surges of adrenaline left me wanting to flee, but there was nowhere to run. Sleep offered no sanctuary. I began leaving lights burning through the night, playing music in a futile attempt to drown out the whispers that still occasionally surfaced in the quiet hours. Faint, grasping sounds, syllables devoid of meaning that nonetheless raised gooseflesh on my arms. I tossed and turned, drenched in sweat, waking each morning more depleted than the last. A visit to Leo's apartment driven by a desperate hope the presence wouldn't follow ended in abrupt retreat. Catching sight of the figure lurking behind my own reflection in his bathroom mirror, I stammered an excuse and fled back to my haunted solitude. Now I exist in this suspended state of dread, trying to chart a course through an unnavigable fear. The shape remains my constant companion, manifesting in arbitrary reflections, a silent stalker. The whispers persist, not words, but utterances imbued with a palpable intent, a desire to draw nearer, to breach the barrier between its world and mine. I feel it in the cold tingle that crawls up my spine, the involuntary hitch in my breath whenever a reflection catches the dark stain hovering behind me. My mind races, seeking an escape hatch, a solution, but finds only dead ends. The basement utility room remains unvisited. The mirror rests in its locked box, hidden but potent. A part of me, worn thin by fear, yearns to retrieve it, to confront whatever lurks within, to force an ending, any ending. Yet a deeper, more primal terror holds me back, the paralyzing certainty that opening it again will be the final act, that this time the barrier will dissolve completely. It's a conviction lodged deep in my gut. One more look and I won't just see the suggestion of eyes. I'll see its true face and perhaps witness it step fully from the confines of the glass into the tangible reality of my life. My hands tremble at the mere thought. So here I remain, Elias, caught in an agonizing loop, unable to destroy the source, terrified to set its occupant free, trapped. Each day is a vigil, scanning my own reflection, half expecting the shadow to detach itself, to coalesce into something solid. My body is a knot of tension, my heart beats a frantic rhythm against my ribs. My stomach churns with each passing pane of glass or polished surface. That umbral outline lingers, an inescapable passenger waiting patiently just behind my shoulder, waiting for its moment. And I am left hoping, with dwindling conviction, that the moment never arrives. A digital shriek sliced through the evening's deep hush, jolting me from my stillness. The clock face glowed, 11:42 p.m., an hour belonging to silence or sleep, not summons. Unfamiliar digits swam on the screen, a local prefix yet utterly alien. Ordinarily, such calls met the void of voicemail, but an unseen current tugged me towards answering. Yes? My voice tight fought to betray no tremor. Silence breathed back, pregnant and cold before a voice like grinding stones scraped across the line. "I see you." An icy tremor traced my vertebrae. "Who is this?" I demanded, my pulse abruptly a frantic drum against my ribs. A chuckle echoed, utterly devoid of mirth, brittle as frost. "Peer out your window, Corbin. Acknowledge me." My veins flooded with ice. How had this entity learned my name? More pressingly, how did it know my sanctuary? I was adrift here, caretaker of a friend's vacant house, on the town's frayed edge while its owner roamed distant continents. The nearest soul resided a lonely quarter-mile off. Against the scream of reason, my feet carried me windowward. Heavy drapes formed a bulwark against the night, yet a sliver revealed the ink-dark yard beyond. Fingers trembling, I edged the fabric back, a mere breath's width. Nothing. Only the familiar expanse, desolate beneath a bone-white moon. "There's nothing here," I relayed into the receiver, relief and confusion warring in my throat. "Look deeper," the voice insisted, a serrated whisper. "I am observing you, Corbin. I am perpetually observing." The curtain fell back, sealing the view. My thoughts scrambled, a cruel jest, surely. Yet the name, the location. "Listen," I forced steadiness into my tone. "I don't know your identity or your aim, but this charade ends now. I'm terminating this call. If you persist, the authorities will be involved." Laughter rasped again, a sound that raised the hairs on my neck. "By all means, Corbin, summon them. Their search will yield emptiness, but I remain, observing always." The connection severed, leaving only the drone of an open line. I lingered, phone pressed hard against my ear, absorbing the dial tone's vacant hum. My hand shook as I finally lowered the device, mind a vortex of dread. Prankster, predator, or was the fabric of my own sanity fraying? The subsequent hour bled away in a frantic ritual of securing portals, peering through glass into impenetrable darkness, hunting for any sign of intrusion. No disturbed earth betrayed a footprint near the house. No twig snapped unnaturally among the sentinel trees. All remained precisely as it should be, an unnerving tableau of normalcy. Eventually, profound weariness dulled the blade of fear, and I collapsed into a shallow, dream-haunted sleep. But respite was fleeting. The following night, as the clock inevitably struck 11:42 p.m., my phone unleashed its cry once more. The identical alien number. This time, silence was my answer. It rang out, then ceased. A moment later, a notification bloomed. One new message. With unsteady digits, I commanded it to play. "You cannot disregard me, Corbin," the same stone-grinding voice declared. "I persist, still observing. Pleasant dreams." I purged the message, blocked the number, heart hammering a frantic rhythm. Impossible. Some elaborate, vicious hoax. Yet the calls persisted. Night after night, precisely at 11:42 p.m., originating from a constantly shifting sequence of numbers. Sometimes I answered, drawn by a morbid compulsion. Sometimes I let the ringing bore into the silence. The voice never varied, its assertion unwavering. It saw me, it watched. Paranoia became my shadow. Every creak of the old house, every rustle outside sent jolts through my system. I fortified the property with electronic eyes and motion-triggered floods, even contemplated acquiring a guardian hound. But the cameras recorded only empty night. The lights remained dormant, and a chilling certainty settled in me that canine defense would prove futile. After a week eroded by this ceaseless torment, frayed nerves compelled me to contact the police. Their sympathy was palpable, their efficacy non-existent. Absent tangible proof of menace, their hands were bound. Change your number, they suggested. Perhaps seek refuge with acquaintances. But retreat felt like surrender. This house was my charge, my friend's trust, and a core of defiance refused eviction by what might merely be phantoms and warped humor. So I remained, and the calls endured. The 10th night marked a divergence. The summons arrived, punctual as fate. 11:42 p.m. I seized the phone instantly. "What is it you require of me?" I cried out, my voice fractured by sleeplessness and strain. A pause stretched longer than before, amplifying the tension. Then, "Emerge, Corbin. It is time we regarded one another." My blood solidified. "No," I stated, voice low but firm. "Absolutely not. I won't be lured." The humorless chuckle returned, a sound now intimately dreadful. "Choice is an illusion you no longer possess, Corbin. Emerge, or I shall enter. Believe me, the former is preferable." The line died. Immobility claimed me, a statue carved from indecision. Every primal instinct shrieked, barricade, call for aid, anything but venture into that waiting dark. Yet a weary fragment deep within craved only cessation, an end to the siege, regardless of its form. Before logic could reassert its hold, I was drifting towards the front door. My hand, an unsteady traitor, turned the knob, easing the barrier open with excruciating quiet. The night hung still, the air thick, pregnant with unshed rain. I stepped onto the porch, eyes frantically scanning the gloom, seeking any flicker of anomaly. "Hello?" I called, hating the thin, frightened sound of my own voice. "I'm out here. What do you want?" Silence answered for a drawn-out moment. Then, from the deepest shadows fringing the yard, a silhouette detached itself. Tall, impossibly gaunt, its locomotion possessing a disturbing, arrhythmic quality. As it drifted into the stark moonlight, my breath hitched. This was no human form. It couldn't be. Its limbs stretched too far. Its cranium was subtly wrong. Its integument a pallid, sickly gray that seemed to drink the light, not reflect it. Where features should have been, there existed only a smooth, undifferentiated blankness. I yearned to flee, to scream, to shatter the paralysis gripping me, but my limbs were stone. I could only watch this thing approach, its gait smoothing, gaining a chilling purpose as it neared. It halted at the base of the porch steps, tilting its unsettling head in a gesture almost questioning. Then, horrifyingly, a seam bisected the featureless expanse of its face, widening into a grotesque rictus, an unholy parody of a mouth. "Greetings, Corbin," it uttered, the voice unmistakably the one from the phone, now given impossible flesh. How gratifying to finally meet in physicality. My voice returned, a ragged whisper. What are you?" The thing's mouth stretched wider, perhaps a smile. I embody many roles, Corbin. Observer, custodian, adjuster of cosmic scales. Meaning what? I pressed, raw fear yielding ground to a morbid, desperate need to understand. Why inflict this torment? The creature canted its head the other way. Torment? No, Corbin, preparation. You see, you possess a unique resonance. You perceive echoes others miss, sense currents that remain hidden. This singularity is why you were selected. My mind spun. Selected for what purpose? To join our ranks, it stated with stark simplicity. To become an observer like myself. To witness existence in its true, unfiltered state, stripped of human delusion. I recoiled, shaking my head, taking an involuntary step back. No, I refuse that. Leave me in peace. The creature's mouth contorted, a potential frown. Regrettably, that path is now closed, Corbin. You have perceived me. There is no reversion. It advanced a step, its elongated arms extending towards me. I strained to move, to break free, but my legs remained locked in terrified obedience. As its cold, gray digits made contact with my face, an electric surge coursed through my entire being. Abruptly, the world fractured and reformed. Colors blazed with impossible intensity. Shadows deepened into chasms of meaning. Sounds flooded my awareness. The sigh of wind across distant grasslands. The frantic heartbeats of unseen creatures nestled deep in the woods. I saw everything. The fundamental architecture of reality laid bare. It was magnificent. It was harrowing. It was unbearable. A scream tore from my throat, echoing across dimensions previously unimagined. The creature, the observer, held me fast, its touch a bizarre anchor amidst the tempest of my exploding senses. Patience, Corbin, it conveyed, the stone-grinding voice now imbued with an odd calm. The initial moments present the greatest challenge. You will adapt. You will gain control. As the primary shockwave receded, focus gradually returned. I looked upon the observer with transformed vision, seeing not the monster perceived moments before, but a complex nexus of energy and intention. What happens now? I asked, the sound of my own voice alien to my newly attuned ears. The observer's energy pulsed, a smile I somehow understood. Now, Corbin, you learn, you observe, and when the cycle demands, you will select the next. The implications settled, vast and chilling. A whirlwind of emotions I couldn't name. Terror, exhilaration, loss, awe churned within me. Yet beneath it all resonated a strange sense of belonging, of inevitability, as if some dormant part of me had always anticipated this destiny. I drew a deep breath, inhaling the newly perceived world. I am ready, I said, startled by the conviction in my voice. The observer inclined its head, extending a long-fingered hand. Then let us commence. As my fingers closed around its cool, smooth ones, I knew the life I'd known was irrevocably extinguished. But another existence, immense and alien and extraordinary, was just dawning. And somewhere in the quiet solitude of another night, a phone began its insistent ring, awaiting an answer from someone singular, someone ready to perceive. The final sigh of my campfire faded at 17 minutes past 2 in the morning. My watch face glowed with the numerals etching the moment into memory, the precise instant the world went awry. Gone was the familiar nocturnal symphony of the wilderness, the chirring insects, the punctual hoot of an owl, the furtive scuffling of unseen creatures in the leaf litter, a profound cessation, absolute and immediate. The quiet slammed into me, a physical blow that stole my breath. For 3 days, I, Silas, had courted solitude deep within the mountain range, a good 15 miles of rugged terrain separating me from the nearest ribbon of asphalt. No signal bars, no fellow travelers. Only myself measuring my resilience against the vast indifference of the wild. This particular clearing, embraced by colossal pines and dense, tangled undergrowth, had beckoned with its profound isolation. My shelter, a dome of nylon, huddled near the clearing's edge, its back to a formidable bulwark of stone and scree. Though embers pulsed with residual orange life, the surrounding woods were utterly inert, a landscape struck dumb. My exhalations manifested as unseen vapor in the crisp alpine air. Against the chill, a single drop of sweat traced a path down my neck. A wrongness permeated the stillness, deep and primal. Then came the first impact, behind my tent. A distinct, weighty crunch of detritus underfoot. Another followed, and a third. Something immense paced with deliberation. Far too substantial for deer, heavier even than bear. It possessed the cadence of human locomotion, yet distorted, the stride unnaturally long, uneven. Rooted beside the dwindling fire, my fingers spasmed around the haft of my hunting knife. The steps traced a perimeter around my small domain, staying just beyond the furthest reach of the firelight's flickering caress. I swiveled my head, a slow, agonizing rotation tracking the sound, but pierced only the impenetrable blackness between the sentinel trees. Directly behind me, the pacing ceased. Silence roared in my ears as I held my breath. 10 seconds stretched into 20, then 30. Abruptly, the movement resumed, completing its circuit. Twice it orbited my position while I remained locked in paralysis. My tent, a mere 15 feet distant, held my rifle, my torch. Logic screamed to bolt for them, yet my limbs were stone. My body refused its own commands. Upon the third revolution, the trajectory shifted. The unseen presence angled inwards, drawing nearer my position by the fire's ghost. The brittle snap of leaves underfoot sounded mere yards away now, directly astern. Still, nothing materialized in the gloom, only that ponderous rhythmic tread. At last, my sinews unlocked. I threw myself forward, rolling clear of the sound's origin, scrambling upright. A desperate sprint carried me to the tent. I nearly tore through the zippered flap in my haste. Hands trembling violently, I fumbled for the rifle, the flashlight. The footsteps pursued, halting just outside the thin fabric wall. The nylon membrane bowed inwards, a distinct pressure against the fragile barrier. My rifle found the distortion, the safety clicking off with metallic finality. The pressure vanished. The steps retreated several paces. "Who's there?" The words tore from my throat, ragged and thin. "Identify yourself. I'm armed." Silence answered, profound and mocking. Then the footsteps resumed their patrol, now encircling the tent itself. I thumbed the flashlight alive, its beam a frantic blade slicing through the tent fabric, illuminating only the indifferent trunks of trees beyond. No silhouette, no shadow play, yet the relentless pacing continued. An abrupt, impossible chill permeated the enclosure. My breath plumed in thick, white gouts, frost spiderwebbed across the inner walls, the nylon crackling audibly as ice crystals bloomed. Again the steps paused, this time squarely before the entrance. The zipper tag began its descent, inch by agonizing inch, moved by an unseen hand. I leveled the rifle at the growing aperture, finger taut against the trigger. Halfway down, it stopped. A wave of Hyperborean air surged inwards, so frigid it seared my lungs. The flashlight beam faltered, pulsed weakly, and died. Darkness absolute. Within it, I heard a soft slithering, something breaching the threshold. The temperature plunged further still. 3 times I fired through the tent wall. The muzzle flare painted the interior in strobing, epileptic bursts. In those fleeting illuminations, I saw nothing, but I felt it, a palpable occupation of space, right there beside me. The air itself felt brittle, agonizing to inhale. Slashing blindly with my knife, I rent the rear wall of the tent and plunged headlong into the night. I ran, a desperate primal flight, faster than I knew possible, crashing through unseen obstacles, tripping over roots lashed by unseen branches. My lungs burned with the glacial air. Behind me, the footsteps matched my pace, drawing closer. The cold pursued, a tangible wave of Arctic malevolence sweeping through the forest. I dared not look back, only forward into the crushing dark. Time lost all meaning. Eventually, my legs buckled, depositing me against the rough bark of a massive tree. The footsteps slowed, then halted nearby. Ice began to sheathe the bark around my hands. My fingers were turning a ghastly blue. The cold was an unbearable pressure. Fumbling with my wrist, I pressed the illumination button. 2:17 a.m. The very minute the silence had fallen. The watch crystal frosted over even as I stared. The footsteps stirred once more, this time receding. Slowly, almost tentatively, the temperature began to climb. Minutes later, the forest's familiar chorus cautiously resumed. The tentative chirp of a cricket, the rustle of leaves, a distant owl's call. I remained there until the first gray light of dawn filtered through the canopy, shivering uncontrollably, rifle clutched like a talisman. When the sun finally crested the ridge, I navigated back to my violated camp. The tent lay in tatters, perforated by 3 bullet holes. A fine layer of frost coated everything within, incongruous in the mild morning air. My camera, retrieved from the wreckage, yielded nothing of my journey. Its memory card was wiped clean, save for a single final image, an empty black frame digitally stamped 2:17 a.m. I salvaged what I could and began the long trek out, an 8-hour ordeal back to the mundane world of my vehicle. I have not sought the solace of the wilderness since. Sometimes, wrenched from sleep, I glance at my bedside clock, a knot of dread tightening, half expecting to see those damning numerals. In moments of quietude, the echo of those footsteps returns, that heavy, deliberate, unnatural gait. And sometimes, inexplicably, even under a summer sun, I feel a breath of impossible cold upon my skin. I scoured archives, online forums, seeking echoes of my experience in that region. Scattered whispers emerged, tales from other hikers mentioning inexplicable pockets of profound cold, sudden suffocating silences, unseen companions dogging their steps through the trees. Few spoke plainly, preferring oblique warnings against venturing out there alone. The strangest postscript, a visit to my physician, haunted by the memory of my cyanotic fingers. He found no trace of tissue damage, dismissing my account of the cold as impossible. Such temperatures, he asserted, would have induced severe frostbite, likely proving fatal within minutes. What stalked those woods remains unknown, a question I lack the courage to pursue. Yet I wonder, had the light not failed, what visage might I have confronted? What shared the confines of my tent? Where did 3 rifle rounds vanish into the night? And why, each night, does my wristwatch pause, its digital display frozen for precisely 60 seconds at 2:17 a.m.? These questions linger, shadows in the periphery of my thoughts, but sharper still is the memory of the pursuit, that slow, methodical pacing, the crushing weight of something vast and impossible moving through the darkness, the calculated way it toyed with me, circling, retreating, advancing, as if savoring the bouquet of my fear. The ruined tent remains, exiled to a box in the garage, its wounds still starkly visible. The thought of closer examination, of seeking some tangible clue, occurs, but is always dismissed, because sometimes late at night, a faint rustling emanates from that box, as if something stirs within its confines, and passing near it, the ambient air grows perceptibly colder. Last week, a letter arrived. Plain envelope, no return address. Inside, a single photograph. My campsite from that night, captured from the perspective of the encompassing tree line. I am visible, a small figure beside the dying fire. Behind me, shimmering faintly in the gloom, is a distortion, a subtle warping of the air like heat haze off summer asphalt. It possesses a vaguely anthropomorphic shape, and it appears to be reaching towards me. The timestamp printed in the corner, 2:16 a.m. I consigned the photograph to flames, but not before noticing them. Deeper within the woods, barely discernible in the background, were other distortions, dozens of ripples in the fabric of the night, all oriented towards my camp, all watching, waiting. They remain, I am certain, out there, woven into the fabric of those ancient woods, waiting for the next solitary soul, waiting for the chance to, what? To hunt, to play, to feed on terror itself. The purpose remains terrifyingly obscure, but this I know: should you find yourself alone beneath the trees, and the world falls silent around you, do not hesitate, do not attempt courage, flee, run until your lungs shred, because if you hear those footsteps, if you feel that soul-leeching cold descend, you are already found, and they will take their leisure, they will circle and test and draw out the fear until the clock strikes 2:17 a.m., always 2:17 a.m. I have wrestled with the notion of delusion, of a mind fractured by isolation, but then I see my watch caught in its nightly temporal loop. I see the frost-scarred tent entombed in my garage. I recall the cold that defied physics, the sound of that impossible tread, the undeniable presence in the suffocating dark. And I know its reality, all of it. Something discovered me in those mountains, something alien and wrong. And sometimes, in the deep quiet of my own home, I fear it followed. Because now, when I wake abruptly at 2:17 a.m., I hear footsteps downstairs, heavy, deliberate footsteps, circling, always circling, and the air grows colder and colder and colder. Reality, I've found, possesses a fragility easily fractured by the mundane. In my case, a dust-laden canvas procured from a forgotten corner of a sprawling bazaar. The afternoon I carried it through my doorway marked the precise moment. The familiar contours of my world began to warp. Allow me to delineate the sequence, unadorned by artifice or appeals for pity. This isn't a plea, merely a frantic cartography of dissolving self, charted before the landmarks vanish entirely. I spied it languishing near the shadowed rear of a stall, overflowing with the detritus of forgotten lives. Presiding over this chaos was a gentleman whose shirt seemed woven from creases and apathy. He barely registered my approach. The painting itself rested against the fractured leg of a chair. A formal portrait, it seemed, evoking the stiff decorum of the 19th century. A man, clad in somber black, stood poised against a backdrop churning with storm-bruised grays. Yet, where his countenance should have been, there existed only an unsettling lacuna, a primed emptiness. An inexplicable magnetism drew me closer. The desire for it was illogical, visceral. When I inquired about the price, the vendor offered a shrug that dislodged dust motes, his gaze finally snagging on mine before he uttered a sum so negligible it felt almost like an insult not to accept. Money changed hands. The canvas, surprisingly light, tucked beneath my arm. Within the confines of my apartment, I leaned the painting against the living room skirting board, lacking an unoccupied nail and uncertain of its rightful place. Minutes dissolved as I scrutinized the canvas, probing the blank oval for the faintest indentation of eye sockets, the ghost of a nose or mouth. Nothing. Just a smooth, perhaps faded vacancy. The subject wore a jacket with a severe high collar, one hand elegantly poised upon a carved table. Behind him, the heavens roiled, a tempestuous palette of grays and charcoals, yet devoid of explicit thunder or lightning. Only an oppressive, murky weight. Deciding to postpone its placement, I retreated to the kitchen, seeking the simple solace of preparing a meal. That evening, however, brought a current of disquiet. Ensconced on the sofa, I surfed through television channels, yet my attention repeatedly snagged on the portrait lurking in my peripheral vision. The featureless void gnawed at me, radiating an unnerving sensation of being observed, despite the utter lack of eyes. It felt like a phantom sentinel. Unable to bear the silent scrutiny, I rose and turned the canvas to face the wall, a flimsy shield against its presence. Fatigue, I reasoned, a simple byproduct of a demanding day. Later, cocooned in bed, I stared into the familiar darkness of the ceiling. The apartment hummed its usual nocturnal tune. The refrigerators droned, the distant sigh of traffic. Eyes closed, I courted sleep. Around the second hour past midnight, a sound pricked the silence. My name, whispered, but unnervingly in my own voice. It seemed to emanate from the living room, a sibilant thread drawn through the stillness. My chest constricted, my mouth turned to parchment. A frantic drumming commenced beneath my ribs, so forceful I almost expected its echo to reverberate off the walls. Dismiss it, I commanded myself, a hypnagogic phantom, a trick of the mind hovering on the cusp of sleep. But then it recurred, distinct and undeniable. Elias, it breathed, a perfect chilling mimicry of my own inflection. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, the cold floorboards shocking my bare feet. Flicking on the hallway light, its sudden glare felt inadequate against the encroaching strangeness. I moved towards the living room, breath held captive in my lungs. Pausing at the threshold, I scanned the space. The painting remained where I'd left it, its back turned. The room was empty of intruders, yet the air hung heavy, perceptibly cooler, raising goose flesh along my arms and the nape of my neck. Drawn by an impulse I couldn't articulate, I approached the painting. A faint rustling sound, like the shift of heavy fabric, brushed against my hearing. Against all logic, a compulsion arose. Turn it around. See if the void remained inviolate. It's just canvas and pigment, I silently argued against the tremor in my hand as I grasped the wooden frame. Spinning it to face me, I saw the familiar composition. The man, the suit, the table, the bruised sky. But something had altered. A subtle topography now disrupted the blankness of the face. A faint suggestion of a jawline had emerged, as if an unseen artist had begun sketching the barest contours of cheekbones, the delicate curve of a chin. A bead of sweat traced a path down my temple. Tentatively, I reached out, my fingertip hovering inches from the surface. Was the paint cracking? Was a hidden layer revealing itself? The texture beneath the apparent smoothness seemed subtly uneven now, hinting at nascent forms. I snatched my hand back, my breathing ragged. The whispers had ceased, but the room felt charged, hostile. Retreating, I backed into the hallway, then fled to my bedroom, shutting and locking the door. Sleep, when it finally claimed me, was a thin, troubled veil. Morning arrived with a knot of dread tightening beneath my ribs. My first act was to confront the painting. Part of me anticipated finding nothing, dismissing the previous night as overwrought imagination. But a closer inspection confirmed the impossible. Further details had materialized. Not a complete visage, certainly, but the nascent architecture of cheekbones was more defined. Faint shadows pooled where eyes might eventually reside. A glacial current coursed through me. My mind scrabbled for rational explanations, finding none. Paintings do not spontaneously generate features. Convinced of my potential delusion, yet needing proof, I captured an image with my phone, comparing it against a photograph taken upon its arrival yesterday. The variance was stark, undeniable. Today's image showed definite structure where yesterday's held only blankness. Breakfast was a choked-down affair, cereal tasting like sawdust. The apartment felt suffocating. I fled to the anonymous refuge of my workplace. Throughout the day, a persistent tremor ran beneath my skin. A colleague, noticing my withdrawn silence, inquired if I felt unwell. I managed a non-committal shrug. Time crawled, each tick of the clock amplifying my reluctance to return home. But return I must. Stepping back inside, the living room air seemed stale, tinged with an odd scent. Dry wood and damp, aged cloth. Heart thudding against my ribs like a trapped bird, I approached the canvas. Silence reigned, but under the lamplight's glow, I froze. The face now possessed the distinct suggestion of eyes. Not fully rendered, but palpable hollows occupied the correct locations. A faint, tentative line hinted at eyebrows. My skin felt clammy. I rubbed my arms compulsively, trying to dispel the prickling unease. Taking a shaky step back, I fought for composure. An idea surfaced, confinement. I needed to sequester it, control it somehow. Hefting the painting, I carried it to a small storage closet adjacent to the bathroom. Inside, amidst forgotten clutter, I leaned it against the wall and firmly shut the door. As an added, almost superstitious measure, I dragged a small chest of drawers before it, a childish barricade against the inevitable. For the remainder of the evening, I feigned normalcy, the television a flickering distraction. Yet persistently, insidiously, I heard my own voice echoing in the recesses of my mind, a siren call emanating from the closet. Around midnight, the strain became unbearable. Rising from the sofa, I traversed the apartment, pressing my ear against the closet door. Again the whisper, my name, plain, clear, and utterly my own. My hands trembled, nausea churned in my stomach. Shoving the chest aside, I wrenched open the door and retrieved the painting. The face had sharpened further, the emergent shapes of the eyes, the nascent curve of the nose. They resonated with my own reflection, not identically, but with a disturbing familiarity. The hairline mirrored mine. The jaw's angle was uncannily close. With a gasp, I dropped the canvas. It struck the floor with a dull, final thud. I stood over it, breathing shallowly, rapidly. It couldn't remain. Disposal seemed the logical course, yet the memory of the bizarre vendor, the ease of the transaction, instilled a deeper fear, a sense that this object possessed an attachment, that merely discarding it wouldn't sever the connection. Still, its presence was intolerable. I compromised, leaning it against the hallway wall, face averted, a temporary truce. That night, sleep was a battleground. Every light in the apartment blazed, offering little comfort. Fitful waking punctuated the darkness, each creak and settling noise morphing into phantom footsteps. My shirt grew damp with perspiration. My mouth felt acrid, dry. Over the ensuing days, the transformation accelerated. Each reluctant glance revealed features coalescing, solidifying. It was becoming undeniably, terrifyingly me. By the fourth day, ambiguity had evaporated. The bone structure, the set of the eyes, their color now emerging, a muted echo of my own. The precise curve of the lips, even the way the hair fell. It was my likeness rendered in oil. Catching my own reflection became a source of profound unease. My eyes seemed shadowed, weary, as if witnessing a stranger usurp my own face. The whispers persisted, growing bolder. No longer confined to the night, they materialized in broad daylight. My name, spoken in my voice, intimate as a breath against my ear, yet sourced from empty air. I'd whirl around, finding nothing. Once, mid-afternoon, the suddenness of a whisper directly behind me caused me to drop a stack of plates. The resultant crash sent a jolt of adrenaline through me, so violent I nearly stumbled. Kneeling amidst the shards, my own fragmented reflection stared back from the glazed pieces, prompting a frantic internal inventory. Was my face fading, its substance migrating to the canvas? Night offered no sanctuary. Lying rigid in bed, I became an unwilling auditor of the apartment's secret sounds, convinced I heard furtive movements in the hall. Often I'd rise and stand sentinel at my bedroom door, peering towards the dark oblong of the painting propped against the wall. It seemed to exert a physical pull, a draining sensation that left my limbs numb, my chest heavy. The thought clawed at my sanity. Was I fracturing under the strain? Yet the morning light always brought the same irrefutable evidence. The painting, my face staring back. This transcended mere stress. One evening, resolve hardened within me. I would confront this entity. Every lamp blazed, banishing shadows. I positioned the painting on a chair, studying it with forensic intensity. My fingers traced the painted surface. It felt unnervingly warm, like living tissue. My stomach lurched. My breath grew shallow. Minute details leaped out. A faint scar high on my forehead, the exact curve of my earlobe, all perfectly replicated. Pressing a hand to my chest, I attempted to quell the frantic rhythm of my heart. "What do you want?" The words emerged hoarse into the charged silence. I waited, feeling a strange tingling cascade down my arms, a subtle pressure building behind my eyes. Then the whisper returned, closer now, almost intimate. "Come closer." Raw panic surged. I shoved the painting violently. It tumbled to the floor, landing face up, the frame digging into the carpet fibers. I loomed over it, panting, trapped in indecision. From a kitchen drawer, I retrieved a roll of heavy-duty tape. A desperate mummification began. My intent was to obliterate the canvas entirely, yet a primal fear prevented me from touching the face directly. Hands betraying me with tremors, I struggled to tear the adhesive strips, managing to wrap the frame and much of the canvas, though glimpses of the face remained visible through the haphazard binding. I wrestled the bound object into a large black refuse sack, then dragged it into my bedroom. A foolish relocation, perhaps. If it could whisper across rooms, surely a locked door was no impediment. Yet some irrational instinct demanded proximity, containment. I shoved the sack behind my bed. That night, the whispers coalesced into something new, a soft, relentless chanting of my name, my own voice, multiplied, echoing not from one location, but seemingly from the very air around me. I clamped my hands over my ears, shouting, "Stop it!" into the oppressive soundscape, but the litany continued, unabated. My body was rigid with tension, neck muscles corded, eyes burning from exhaustion. Eventually, oblivion claimed me. I awoke to the pale light of early morning, the chanting silenced. Turning, my gaze fell upon the refuse sack in the corner. Was it my imagination, or did I perceive a subtle shifting within, as if the canvas itself stirred? I didn't investigate. A wave of nausea washed over me, accompanied by the sting of tears I hadn't realized were falling. My chest felt banded with iron. Drastic action was imperative. Forcing myself through the motions of dressing, I hauled the bagged painting towards the door. The hallway needed to be clear. I couldn't bear scrutiny or questions. Inside the descending elevator, a faint whisper seeped from the sack, sending tendrils of ice down my spine. I pressed on. For 10 minutes I drove aimlessly, searching for a suitable final resting place. Yet my thoughts churned. What if disposal was futile? What if, like some cursed homing pigeon, it simply found its way back? Defeated, I returned home, the painting my unwelcome passenger. Re-entering my apartment felt like crossing a threshold into deeper despair. Frustration warred with a primal fear that left my legs unsteady, my mouth tasting of bitter anxiety. I deposited the sack on the living room floor. As I stood there, breathing heavily, my own voice spoke again, calm, almost conversational. "You're almost ready," it murmured. Dizziness washed over me. I sank to my knees, staring at the black plastic shroud. Minutes passed as I clenched and unclenched my fists. trying to anchor myself to the tactile reality of the carpet beneath my palms. Finally rising, I tore open the sack. The duct tape was ripped, ruptured in places as if strained from within. The painting's face, now unobscured, was utterly perfectly mine. Not an approximation, not a resemblance, but a flawless, terrifying mimesis. Even the expression held a chilling familiarity, warped into something knowing, sentient. Nausea surged. My head throbbed with a dull, heavy ache. With trembling hands, I dragged the painting upright, leaning it against the wall once more. My palms were slick with sweat, my heartbeat hammered in my ears, a frantic internal drum. Thought became difficult, fragmented. My reflection, caught in the glass of a framed photograph nearby, seemed unnaturally pale, my eyes dull, leached of vibrancy. I wiped perspiration from my brow, attempting to regulate my breathing. Am I still me? The question echoed in the sudden silence. I looked into the painted eyes. They seemed sharp, intensely alive. Then I touched my own face, tracing the contours of my cheeks. My skin felt strangely cool to the touch. And so, here I remain. The painting leans against the plaster, facing me. I am gazing into it as I recount this. Its eyes are my eyes, in color, in shape. The severe, old-fashioned suit it wears seems almost tangible. The backdrop remains a canvas of bruised clouds. But now, a subtle luminescence seems to emanate from around the figure, as if it gathers the room's light, or perhaps prepares to step free of its two-dimensional prison. A profound weakness permeates my body, a sense of having been utterly drained. My shoulders ache with tension. Gooseflesh prickles my skin intermittently. The whispers are quiescent for now, replaced by a low, persistent buzzing in my ears, like faint static on an open channel. Every few moments I feel an inexorable pull towards the canvas, the same magnetic draw I felt in the bazaar, intensified now, like standing before a mirror that reflects more than just image. Moving closer feels perilous. Fear is a raw physical presence tangling my thoughts. I cling to the notion of my identity, myself, with dwindling strength, yet a chilling suspicion whispers that the battle may already be lost. Is that me, trapped in oil and pigment? Or is the painting stealing me piece by piece? All I know with certainty is that I cannot look away. And that is the unvarnished truth. The memory clings, sharp as glass shards, the day the mirror arrived. It materialized on my porch, a bulky, misshapen parcel, swaddled in layers of thick bubble wrap, utterly devoid of a return address, provenance unknown. Curiosity gnawed at me as I tore through the plastic sheath and stiff paper, revealing a tall, arresting looking glass framed in the Gothic style. Its timber was a dark, tormented black, writhing with carvings, skulls, and cryptic symbols etched with an unnerving precision. So deep they seemed almost wet, like freshly drawn ink. An instantaneous tremor ran through me, a cold premonition, yet fascination held sway. My fingers traced the uppermost skull. Its surface felt abrasive, granular, unnervingly akin to actual bone. I dismissed the prickling discomfort, a free piece of decor, wasn't it? And resolved to hang it in my bedroom. My life possesses a certain predictable rhythm. Warehouse drone by day, evenings punctuated by the flicker of the television, maybe the condensation beading on a cold bottle of beer. Specters and arcane collectibles hold no allure for me. Still, a mirror is merely a mirror, or so I reasoned. I selected a vacant stretch of wall opposite my bed, hammered in a few nails, secured a sturdy hook. A peculiar resistance met my efforts, the object feeling disproportionately heavy, freighted with more than just its physical mass. Once mounted, I stepped back. The glass, pristine and smooth, offered a clear reflection. My own face regarded me, impassive. Shrugging off the lingering strangeness, I moved on with my evening. Later, scrubbing my teeth before bed, I cast a cursory glance towards it. My reflection blinked back, utterly unremarkable. I extinguished the lights, burrowed beneath the sheets. A persistent thread of unease tugged at my consciousness, but I resolutely pushed it away, attributing it to the frame's morbid aesthetic. Eyes closed, I courted sleep. Midnight found me shuffling back from the bathroom bleary-eyed. Passing the mirror, a flicker of wrongness snagged my attention. My reflection seemed off. I fumbled for the small lamp on my nightstand, bathing the room in a soft glow. There it stood, my mirrored self, yet its movements echoed mine with a fractional hesitation, a lag in mimicry. I tilted my head. Its head tilted a beat later, a blink, and suddenly it synchronized perfectly. Exhaustion, I told myself firmly. Crawling back into bed, I wrestled with the unsettling image. Morning light brought a test. Standing before the glass, I raised a hand. My reflection mirrored the gesture instantly. Normal. I stepped closer. It advanced in tandem. Relief washed over me, thin but welcome. The night's aberration must have been trick of fatigue. I dressed and departed for work. For several days, the mirror maintained its passive facade. It hung there, an unsettling fixture with its macabre ornamentation. Occasionally, my gaze would drift towards it, particularly in the dim evening light when the carved skulls seemed to writhe with phantom motion. Illusions, I insisted, my mind playing tricks. I tried to ignore its presence. One evening, drawn from a late-night show towards the kitchen for a snack, I passed my open bedroom door. The mirror was visible from the hallway, angled just so. I glanced in, and my blood ran cold. My reflection stood within the frame, but it wasn't mirroring my posture. I was leaning from the corridor, peering in. The figure in the glass stood squarely facing outward, its gaze locked directly onto mine, motionless, a sentinel in its own version of my room. My stomach lurched, my mouth turned to dust. Compelled, I forced myself closer. The reflection advanced concurrently, yet its stare remained unnervingly fixed, cold and appraising. Adrenaline surged, my heart hammering against my ribs. I attempted to speak, but only a dry rasp escaped. Slowly, deliberately, I raised a hand to wipe sweat from my brow. The mirrored figure executed the same motion, but with a languid, measured quality, its eyes never leaving mine. A strange pull emanated from the glass, a silent summons. "Run!" screamed instinct. "Stay!" countered a morbid need for certainty, a desperate urge to confirm I wasn't fracturing. My legs obeyed, leaden, carrying me into the bedroom. The reflection tracked my entrance. The moment I stood directly before it, normalcy snapped back into place. My own face stared out, damp with fear, yes, but perfectly synchronized. I swallowed, the sound loud in the stillness. My hands trembled. Sleep was a fraught, elusive thing that night, punctuated by the memory of those eyes. Accusatory, perhaps, or merely alien, closing my own brought forth that chilling stare. I eventually switched the television back on, letting its mundane drone fill the silence until dawn. The following days saw me actively circumventing the mirror. I dressed in the bathroom's smaller reflection, stole only fleeting glances before leaving. Yet its presence was undeniable, a palpable weight in the room. It felt like being watched. A pressure would build at the back of my skull when I was in the bedroom, a certainty of observation. Turning, I'd find only the twisted frame, my reflection placid, but the comfort never lasted. One night, committing the error of a final look before sleep, I saw my reflection leaning forward, closer to the glass than my actual position. Gooseflesh prickled my arms. I instinctively stepped back. The mirrored figure remained advanced, its shoulders subtly tensed as if poised to push through the surface. A blink, a heartbeat, and it retreated, matching my stance once more. A ragged breath escaped my tight chest. Light off, covers pulled high. My heart galloped for what felt like an hour before oblivion claimed me. Another time, entering the bedroom, I was confronted not with my familiar space, but with something else entirely reflected in the glass. A tenebrous chamber unfolded within the frame, its walls slick-looking, damp. The illumination was meager, suggestive of a distant, solitary flame. A torch, perhaps, or a candle, unseen but casting long, distorted shadows. The texture of the walls seemed rough-hewn, like ancient stone blocks. A profound chill permeated the air. I pinched my arm, seeking the anchor of reality. My feet felt weighted as I approached, the pulse in my ears a deafening drum. Closer still, I fancied I heard faint, far-away sounds, the rhythmic plink of dripping water, the scuff of movement down echoing corridors. The air in my room remained still, yet sweat beaded on my skin. When I was barely a foot from the surface, the scene abruptly vanished, replaced by my mundane bedroom. The shift was jarring, like a curtain yanked aside. I stumbled back, breath catching in my throat, and sank onto the edge of my bed, waiting for the world to steady. Daily life became my attempted refuge. Longer hours at the warehouse, evenings spent resolutely in the living room, lights blazing, but the bedroom and the mirror remained unavoidable. Sometimes my own face greeted me, other times fleetingly. That crypt-like space flickered into view. It never lingered, but each glimpse sent jolts of adrenaline through me, the image of those damp stone walls imprinting itself with chilling clarity. They felt cold, an impossible sensation transmitted through the glass, settling deep in my bones. A gnawing dread warned me against prolonged observation, against seeing what might eventually appear within that shadowed recess. I reached out to my friend, Marcus. He's no occultist, just a guy with a passing interest in antiques and oddities. I recounted the mirror's arrival, the unsettling frame, the increasingly bizarre reflections. My voice, I tried to keep level, but the phone felt slick in my trembling hand. He listened, admitted he'd never encountered anything quite like it, and pragmatically advised getting rid of the damned thing if it was causing such distress. The thought had occurred repeatedly, smashing it, dragging it to the curb. Yet, whenever I gathered the resolve, a visceral reluctance paralyzed me, a sickening lurch in my gut. It felt possessive, as if the mirror itself resisted removal. My arms would grow heavy at the mere thought, my heart rate spiking, breath catching. So I procrastinated, trapped in indecision. One evening, I attempted a simpler solution: concealment. Fetching an old blanket from the closet, I stood before the mirror, palms sweating, gaze fixed on the leering skulls and serpentine carvings. With a surge of will, I flung the blanket over its top edge. A fragile moment of relief settled over me, no reflection, no crypt. Then a soft, dry, scraping sound emanated from behind the fabric, like fingernails drawn slowly across wood. I flinched back. The blanket slithered down, pooling at my feet. The reflection's eyes met mine across the newly revealed surface. Was that a flicker of amusement, a mocking curl of the lips at my futile effort? Nausea churned within me. Terrified of provoking that sound again, I left the mirror uncovered. I didn't repeat the attempt. Later that same night, I awoke drenched in sweat. A glance confirmed my reflection was present. It stood there, mirroring my stillness, but its mouth was stretched into a subtle, unsettling smile. My own lips were pressed firmly together. I could feel it, yet the glass showed a definite grin. My heart hammered, a frantic pulse audible in my ears. Reaching for the bedside lamp, I flooded the room with light, hoping to dispel the illusion. Instantly, the reflection's expression smoothed into neutrality. A wave of sickness washed over me, but I remained frozen in bed, unwilling to approach, simply staring at that other me until exhaustion dragged me under once more. The subsequent days became a tightrope walk of tension. My own apartment felt alien, hostile. I minimized time in the bedroom, but sleep remained a necessity. Each night brought subtle shifts in the reflection. Eyes that seemed angrier, a head tilted at an unnatural angle. Glimpses of the dark crypt became more frequent, sometimes overlaying my own reflection, a disturbing palimpsest. No voices manifested, but the faint echoes persisted, that phantom dripping, the suggestion of distant stone. Nightmares plagued me, not of monsters, but of standing paralyzed before the mirror, unable to look away. I'd wake slick with sweat, heart pounding, only to find the reflection normal or near enough to sow doubt. My existence narrowed to a cycle of fear and uncertainty. Online searches proved fruitless. No identifying marks, no originating shop, just this cursed object dominating my space. The thought of passing it on felt like a betrayal, foisting this insidious dread onto another soul. There were moments I stood outside my own front door, keys clutched tight, wrestling for the courage to enter. Home no longer felt like sanctuary. One evening, fatigue overriding caution, I decided I'd had enough. A confrontation was necessary. I strode directly to the mirror, stared hard at my reflection. My breathing was rapid, chest visibly rising and falling. The reflection matched. Enough! I managed, my voice thin but audible. The reflection's lips remained still, its eyes narrowed fractionally. That familiar cold dread coiled in my gut. Enough, I repeated, louder, firmer. Silence from the glass, but then a quiet tapping, distinct, like knuckles rapping lightly on the inside of the mirror. I recoiled, stumbling backward. The reflection's hands hadn't moved, yet the tap, tap, tap continued for several seconds before fading. Whirling, I fled the room, slamming the door shut behind me. I paced the hallway, muscles knotted, hands clenched. My mind raced, a frantic scramble for logic that found no purchase. Water gulped down, deep breaths. This wasn't delusion. The mirror was actively malevolent, its phenomena undeniable. A plan. I needed a plan. A hammer. The memory of that paralyzing resistance surfaced. Selling it. To whom? How? The ethical quandary remained. Answers eluded me. Now every night unveils new strangeness in that glass. Sometimes the mimicry lags, subtle delays betraying its otherness. Sometimes it remains perfectly still while I shift or scratch my arm. Increasingly I see the crypt, the faint flicker in the oppressive dark. Hear the imagined echo of dripping water. My heart rate quickens at the sight of those damp, cold walls, a chill seeping into my very marrow. There's a growing certainty that prolonged focus will reveal something moving within that desolate space. A heavy knot resides permanently in my stomach, a primal warning against looking too deeply, yet avoidance feels increasingly impossible. I'm putting this down because the silence is becoming unbearable. Few know the full extent. The fear of dismissal, of being labeled unstable, is potent. But I'm not. I'm just Leo, an ordinary man tethered to an object that defies existence. Its scrutiny is constant. At night, vivid imaginings plague me, the reflection detaching itself from the glass, climbing out, or worse, pulling me inwards, crossing over into that crypt. That's the deepest fear. I don't know what resides there, but I feel its presence, a suffocating pressure on my chest, a constant reminder of the waiting entity on the other side. How much longer can this endure? I dread the day I look into the mirror and my bedroom is gone, replaced permanently by the crypt, or the day my reflection fixes me with that terrible grin, refusing to release my gaze. Every option short of shattering it has been considered, yet the act itself feels insurmountable, my limbs refusing cooperation at the mere thought of touching that twisted frame again. For now, I am trapped. Each dawn brings the question, what new horror will the reflection reveal today? Each night I lie rigid, listening for the tapping. That is my reality. The mirror remains, watching, waiting, and I cannot shake the conviction that if I stare too long, truly see what lurks there, something irrevocable will happen, something will break within me. So I try not to look, but the pull is insidious, a morbid fascination with the source of my terror. Perhaps one day courage or desperation will find me. Perhaps not. But tonight it hangs there still, on my bedroom wall, issuing its silent, relentless dare. "500 feet," chirped the synthesized voice from the dashboard, bright and utterly certain. "Turn right onto Whispering Ash Road." Elias squinted through the hypnotic sweep of the wipers. Rain lashed the windscreen, blurring the impenetrable wall of skeletal trees flanking the asphalt ribbon. Whispering Ash Road. There was no road, just the dripping maw of the forest swallowing the headlight beams whole. Hours bled into an amorphous gray smudge behind him. The city, a blur of handshakes and fluorescent lighting, receding with every mile devoured. Home beckoned, a siren song of familiar comforts, a bed that knew the shape of his fatigue. That yearning had been the hook, the digital navigator's promise of a swifter passage, the bait swallowed whole without a second thought. Now marooned on this forgotten artery of nowhere, the hook felt lodged deep in his throat, a burgeoning regret tightening with every pulse beat. He eased the sedan onto the sodden shoulder, the tires spitting gravel like angry curses. The GPS, oblivious or perhaps malicious, pinged again, insistent on its phantom turn. Recalculating, it offered blandly, a digital shrug in the face of his mounting disbelief. Elias scoffed, a harsh sound in the sudden quiet, fumbling for his phone, a lifeline back to the charted world, to sanity. The screen flared, illuminating his tense face, then displayed the stark, brutal truth. 5 empty bars beneath the mocking legend. No signal. A dead zone. Utterly, terrifyingly disconnected. Breathe. Just breathe. Panic was a luxury this place wouldn't afford. Reverse, retrace, regain the highway. Simple mechanics, simple logic. As the car pivoted in a clumsy 3-point turn, the headlight beams sliced through the dense undergrowth lining the road. A flicker, a shape detaching itself from the deeper gloom, just at the edge of perception. He stamped the brake, heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Nothing. Just the wind whispering secrets through sodden leaves, playing tricks on a mind frayed by exhaustion. Imagination, Elias muttered, the word tasting like ash on his tongue. He shook his head, forcing the unsettling image away. He drove, tracing what felt like the path back toward civilization. Yet the road coiled differently now, serpentine hugging the encroaching woods with suffocating intimacy. Each bend seemed a repetition, a mocking echo of the last, designed to disorient. The trees, black monoliths dripping water, leaned closer, their branches like skeletal fingers scraping the roof. The GPS screen remained stubbornly blank, a void mirroring the landscape's refusal to be mapped, to be known. Reboot sequences yielded only darkness. This forest, this path, existed outside the tidy grid of satellites and servers. Time dissolved into an unnerving elasticity. Was it 1 hour? 3? The fuel needle sank relentlessly towards empty, a stark visual metaphor for his dwindling resources. Fatigue laid a heavy hand, blurring the edges of reality, making the shadows dance with imagined movement. Then, a glimmer in the rearview mirror, twin points of faint luminescence suspended in the black. Salvation? Another lost soul navigating this labyrinth? A flicker of hope ignited, only to be instantly chilled by their peculiarity. Too wide set for a standard vehicle. Too pallid, not headlights, not quite. Elias nudged the accelerator, a knot of unease tightening in his stomach. The lights held their distance, perfectly synchronized with his increased speed. He slowed. They slowed, maintaining their position with unsettling precision. A predatory patience emanated from them, a silent, watchful pursuit that prickled the hairs on his neck. Sweat slicked his palms on the steering wheel, his knuckles showing white. He tried weaving explanations, another disoriented driver, perhaps, following his lead. But the cold dread pooling in his gut knew better. This was not rescue, this was pursuit. The road bucked violently to the left, a sudden sharp curve that seemed to materialize out of the rain-streaked darkness. As the car swung around the blind bend, Elias's breath hitched, lodging painfully in his throat. A silhouette stood stark against the rain-slicked asphalt, directly in his path. He stomped the brakes. Tires screamed protest, the car fishtailing on the wet surface, before skidding to a halt mere feet away. It was a woman, motionless as a statue carved from moonlight and shadow. Her posture was unnaturally rigid, her face hidden beneath a heavy curtain of impossibly black hair that cascaded over her shoulders, clad in a simple white dress that seemed to repel the surrounding darkness, glowing faintly in the harsh glare of his headlights. He sat paralyzed, a fly caught in amber, the drumming of the rain on the roof suddenly deafening. The woman remained utterly still, an effigy of dread planted in the middle of the nowhere road. Behind him, the twin glows pulsed, nearer now, casting long, distorted shadows within the car. A mad impulse seized him. Help her, ask for help, and his trembling fingers brushed the cold metal of the door latch. At his touch, her head snapped up. The curtain of hair fell away. Elias choked back a scream that died in his throat. Vacant pits stared where eyes should be, abyssal and depthless, reflecting the headlight beams like polished obsidian. Her mouth stretched not in a scream, but a horrifying rictus revealing rows of needle-sharp fangs. Reflexively, he slammed the gear shift into reverse, stomped the accelerator. A cough, a sputter, silence. The engine was dead. She took a step towards his fragile sanctuary, then another, her movements disjointed, jerky, puppet-like, as if unfamiliar with the limbs she inhabited. He twisted the key desperately, futile grinding. Again, nothing but the mocking click of the ignition. She advanced, inexorable. The faint lights behind swelled, resolving into horrifying focus. He glanced desperately at his phone. Still no bars, but the clock display was a frantic blur, digits cascading impossibly fast, time itself unraveling. In the screen's dark mirror, the reflection showed not a vehicle's approach, but a constellation of luminous, unblinking eyes floating in the night. Dozens of them. The woman reached his window, her face pressed close, lipless mouth pulled into a grotesque facsimile of a smile. A skeletal hand rose, long, sharp nail tapping the glass. Tick. A hairline crack appeared, a silver fracture in the barrier. Tick. It spider-webbed outwards with sickening speed. Tick. The glass groaned. It wouldn't hold. Elias squeezed his eyes shut, retreating into the blackness behind his eyelids, a primal instinct to block out the encroaching horror. Not real. Sleep-deprived hallucination. Wake up. He dug his fingernails into his arm, welcoming the sharp sting of pain, grounding him. Wake up, wake up, wake up, he hissed through clenched teeth, a desperate mantra against the encroaching madness. The tapping ceased. Silence, save for the frantic thrumming in his ears and the receding echo of cracking glass. He dared to open his eyes. Headlights streamed past in comforting streaks of normalcy. The familiar rumble of traffic filled the air. He was parked on the shoulder of a bustling highway, rain still falling but reflecting the mundane glow of streetlights. The digital map on his GPS glowed reassuringly, precisely pinpointing his location amidst the known world. Had exhaustion conjured the entire ordeal, a waking nightmare born of fatigue and isolation? As the frantic rhythm of his heart subsided to a heavy tremor, his gaze fell upon the passenger seat. Coiled against the pale fabric lay a single strand of hair, long, impossibly dark, glossy like obsidian. The woman's hair. His breath hitched, cold dread washing over him anew. With a shaking hand, he reached out, pinched it between his fingers. It felt utterly real, corporeal, a tangible relic from an impossible encounter. He flung it away as if it were venomous, the touch burning cold against his skin. The key turned in the ignition. and the engine roared reassuringly to life. Merging back into the river of light and steel, Elias couldn't shed the icy conviction that he hadn't merely woken up, but escaped. That something ancient and hungry, residing in those lightless woods, had tasted his fear and let him go. For now. Weeks bled into months marked by a newfound, skittish vigilance. Night driving became an ordeal fraught with imagined shapes in the periphery. Maps were scrutinized with obsessive care before every journey. The GPS's cheerful suggestions for optimized journeys were ignored with religious fervor. Gradually, inevitably, the sharp edges of the terror dulled. The incident receded, becoming a bizarre anecdote, softened by the mind's insistence on disbelief, a story told with a nervous laugh. The hair, a stray thread perhaps, clinging statically from his coat, or maybe his own, somehow darkened by the strange light. The trick of memory, the mind seeking equilibrium, smoothed over the impossible edges of the experience. Until one rain-slicked evening, months hence, driving a familiar route home from a late meeting, the GPS chimed, its synthesized voice jarringly cheerful in the quiet car. In 500 feet, turn right onto Whispering Ash Road. Elias's blood turned to ice water in his veins. His head snapped involuntarily to the right. There it was, an unlit, narrow track snaking into absolute black woods, a path that hadn't existed moments before, a tear in the fabric of the known road. And standing sentinel at its mouth, half veiled in shadow and mist, the unmistakable silhouette in white. He didn't slow, didn't hesitate, foot hard on the accelerator, hands clamped tight to the wheel, eyes fixed rigidly ahead. A fleeting glance in the rearview mirror confirmed his deepest fear. Two pale, wide-set lights detached themselves from the darkness at the mouth of the Phantom Road, beginning a silent, inevitable pursuit. What transpired on that impossible stretch of asphalt remains shrouded, a question suspended forever between nightmare and some terrifying, encroaching reality. But Elias knew, with chilling, visceral certainty, that the digital oracle whispering directions could no longer be trusted. Some shortcuts lead not to destinations, but to places best left undiscovered, places that wait beyond the map's edge. Some roads remain untrodden because something waits there, patiently, hungrily, in the dark. The tumblers yielded with a sigh that resonated deeper than mere mechanics, a finality that prickled the hairs on my neck. As the heavy door creaked inward, unveiling the shadowed, timbered heart of our rented refuge, an intuition tightened within me. We were crossing a threshold, stepping into a narrative from which escape might not be a simple turn of the page. If only the chilling accuracy of that premonition had been clear then. "Our fortress of solitude, milady," Julian announced, his voice echoing slightly in the stillness as he maneuvered our luggage across the worn plank floor. I trailed him, my gaze sweeping the main room, a space dominated by a hearth of rough-hewn stone, flowing into a compact kitchenette tucked away like an afterthought. Charming, yes, in that isolated, forgotten-by-time manner. We'd unearthed the listing online, seduced by promises of seclusion deep within the woods, an idol for shedding the city's frantic skin. The photographs depicted breathtaking forest vistas pledging tranquility. Its affordability had felt almost suspicious, yet we'd seized the opportunity. Now, inhabiting the actual space, a subtle dissonance hummed beneath the surface. The air hung thick, a tapestry woven from dust motes, damp earth, and the ghost of wood smoke tinged with an underlying scent of decay. The furniture, though scrubbed clean, bore the patina of countless occupants, silent witnesses to seasons past. And surely the floorboards protested our weight with an unnerving, almost conversational creak. Perhaps we could invite some fresh air in, I ventured, attempting to displace the nascent anxiety. It feels rather preserved. Julian nodded, approaching the nearest window. He wrestled with the sash, muscles straining, before it surrendered with a high-pitched screech of resistance. "Seems they prefer things sealed tight," he quipped, breathing a little heavily. A smile flickered across my lips, dutifully offered, yet the window's stubborn reluctance lingered. It felt less like neglect, more like defiance, as though it guarded secrets it was unwilling to air. The remainder of the afternoon dissolved into the rituals of arrival, unpacking garments into drawers that smelled faintly of cedar, arranging our provisions within the diminutive refrigerator. As twilight began to bleed through the dense canopy, painting long, skeletal shadows across the floor, Julian coaxed a fire to life in the stone hearth. Its flickering orange glow and radiating warmth did manage to soften the edges of my apprehension. "See? Perfection," Julian murmured, his arm encircling my shoulders as we settled onto the time-softened sofa. Exactly the quietude we craved, a chance to just be. I leaned into his solid presence, wanting desperately to absorb his optimism. But as the world outside surrendered fully to darkness, the sensation of being observed intensified, prickling my skin. Each glance towards the black mirrors of the windows carried the expectation of meeting eyes staring back. Sleep proved elusive that first night. The unfamiliar bed, a landscape of hidden lumps beneath sheets whispering of mothballs. Yet it wasn't merely the physical terrain keeping me adrift. It was the cabin's nocturnal symphony. Creaks and groans, too rhythmic, too deliberate to be mere structural settling. Once, a distinct impression of footsteps pacing the hallway just beyond our door sent my heart into a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I lay rigid, straining my ears against the oppressive silence that followed, hearing only the frantic pulse in my own ears. Morning found Julian already orchestrating coffee in the kitchenette. "Sleep soundly?" he inquired, offering a steaming mug. I shook my head, the strong, dark brew a welcome anchor. "Not entirely. This place has a peculiar nighttime vocabulary." He chuckled, a sound too light for the space. "Character Alara, the genuine article." The urge to recount the phantom footsteps, to voice the unease solidifying within me, warred with the desire not to poison our escape with what might be perceived as paranoia. Instead, I proposed a hike after breakfast, explore the woods. The forest embracing the cabin possessed a wild, untamed beauty, soaring pines filtering sunlight into shifting patterns on the mossy floor. For several hours, navigating paths barely etched into the undergrowth, the cabin's unsettling atmosphere receded. Yet, as our loop brought us back towards the structure, the feeling of unseen scrutiny returned, potent and palpable. "Julian," I whispered, my hand instinctively clamping onto his forearm. "Look, over there." His gaze followed mine towards a gap between two sentinel trees in the middle distance. For a fleeting second, I perceived it. A static form, dark against the foliage, watching. An eye blink, and only interlacing branches remained. "Look at what?" Julian squinted, scanning the indicated spot. I shook my head, a tremor running through me. Nothing. A trick of the light, I suppose. But a cold certainty settled in my gut. It was no shadow. And as the cabin itself came fully into view, a detail froze the blood in my veins. The window, the one Julian had fought to open yesterday, was now resolutely shut. "Did you close that window last night?" I asked, striving for a casual tone that felt utterly false on my tongue. He knit his brows. "Don't think so. Wind, maybe." I nodded mutely, unwilling to articulate the conviction that no mere breeze could have forced that recalcitrant sash closed. And wouldn't such an event have produced a sound, a slam we surely would have registered? Throughout the day, the strangeness escalated. Objects we distinctly remembered placing in one spot materialized elsewhere. Pockets of inexplicable cold bloomed in random corners, defying the summer warmth, and persistently, relentlessly, the sensation of being watched, measured, assessed. That night, cocooned in the lumpy bed, the sounds began anew, amplified, insistent. The familiar creaks were now underscored by a distinct dragging noise from below, like dead weight being hauled across the floorboards. "Julian," I hissed, shaking his shoulder until he surfaced from sleep. "Listen, do you hear that?" He sat upright, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "Hear?" The question died on his lips as a resonant thump echoed from the living room, the sound of something substantial hitting the floor. Julian's eyes widened in the gloom. "Okay, heard that," he conceded, casting aside the covers. "Stay put, I'll investigate." "No!" My fingers dug into his arm. "We go together." Moving with excruciating slowness, we navigated the darkened hallway, Julian leading with the narrow beam of a flashlight snatched from the bedside table. The light sliced through the oppressive blackness, revealing nothing. The living room appeared undisturbed, exactly as we had left it. "See, likely just an animal outside," Julian offered, though the tremor in his voice betrayed his attempt at reassurance. We were turning back towards the bedroom when my eye caught something alien on the low coffee table. Beside the paperback I'd been reading lay a small volume bound in scarred leather. It hadn't been there earlier. Of that I was chillingly certain. With hands that trembled, I lifted it. The pages, brittle as autumn leaves, were filled with looping script, the ink faded to sepia by time. As my eyes scanned the entries, my pulse accelerated into a frantic gallop. It was the journal of a woman named Serafina, who had resided in this cabin decades prior. She wrote of unsettling incidents, of possessions migrating inexplicably, of disembodied voices whispering in the dead of night. She wrote of a presence, an entity of palpable darkness and ill will, its influence seemingly intensifying with every day she remained. The final entry, scrawled with a desperation that clawed off the page, turned my blood to ice. "It is here," Serafina had written. Her once elegant hand devolved into jagged slashes of ink. "Merciful God, it is here. I cannot leave. If this is found, do not linger. Flee. Flee while you still possess the chance." I looked up, meeting Julian's wide eyes, my face surely a mask of terror. "We have to get out right now." He started to form a protest, but precisely then, every light in the cabin spasmed, then extinguished, plunging us into an abyssal darkness. Into the sudden suffocating void dropped a sound, a low, guttural amusement thick with malice. We didn't hesitate. Snatching only phones and car keys, we bolted for the door. It resisted, pushing back as if held fast by an unseen force, but a final adrenaline-fueled shove burst it open. We sprinted across the gravel drive, the sharp stones biting into our bare feet, a frantic tattoo against the oppressive silence. As Julian fumbled, keys rattling against the ignition, I risked a glance back at the cabin. Framed in the upstairs window, a face leered down, inhuman, contorted, its mouth stretched into a horrifying rictus grin. The engine roared, tires spitting gravel, and we tore away from that place, devouring the dark road. We didn't cease our flight until the lights of the nearest town offered a fragile sanctuary. In a sterile motel room, we huddled together, starting at every creak, every distant noise until the gray light of dawn. Daylight brought the temptation to rationalize, to dismiss the night's terrors as shared hysteria, a waking nightmare born of isolation and suggestion. But the visceral memory, the shared knowledge of what we had felt and seen, was undeniable. Our belongings remained behind. We never returned. We informed the rental agency of a sudden emergency, their surprising lack of probing questions, and offer of a partial refund somehow more unsettling than accusation. Weeks later, after the immediate grip of the nightmares had loosened, morbid curiosity drove us to research. The digital breadcrumbs we followed led to a chilling history. The cabin, we discovered, was notorious. Scattered accounts surfaced online. Tales from renters who had fled under similar circumstances, whispering of paranormal assaults. And then there were the others, those whose stays had ended not in flight, but in silence. Vanishings, officially unsolved. We count ourselves among the fortunate, the ones who escaped the cabin's embrace. Yet sometimes in the deepest hours of the night, that sensation returns, the feeling of unseen eyes upon me. And I wonder, chillingly, if some fragment of that place, that presence, didn't latch on, following us out of the woods and into the light. So, should you ever find yourself scrolling through listings, searching for that perfect secluded woodland retreat, exercise caution. Sometimes paradise comes at too steep a price, and sometimes the things that stir in the darkness are terrifyingly real.